Hello and welcome to my Chapter 18 lecture on adult career transitions and specific populations. Okay, so in today's lecture, we're going to talk about career counseling in the community setting, adult career transitions, and then career counseling needs for specific populations inclusive of these groups. So career challenges frequently addressed in the community setting. So adult career transitions are a big challenge that is frequently addressed. I even just this week have seen 4 or 5 clients at least that are trying to change their job, do something new, add something to what they're already doing because they're needing more money, because of inflation, because of economy, or because of really just life changes, right? Schlossberg's definition of an adult career transition is any event or non-event that results in changed relationships, routines, assumptions, and roles. So a lot of different things can contribute to transitioning in one's career. And then there can also be complications for individuals trying to enter the workforce for the first time, or maybe perhaps re-enter the workforce if they were part of it for a time and then left and now they're coming back. This could be really anybody, but you want to have special considerations for persons with disabilities, military veterans, ex-offenders, homemakers, and caretakers, because there might be skill development that's necessary. There might be particular limitations to what the person is or isn't willing to do, or isn't able to do, just based on PTSD or war injury or autism spectrum disorder or other different things that could affect someone's ability to do work. So next slide. So transition factors. So how difficult a transition is for any individual depends on a variety of factors. So precursors, what are things that pre-exist that led to changing their career, like a precursor to like what happened before. Precipitants are the things that happened just before the transition. So precursors, precipitants are kind of similar but different. But what are the things basically that came before the transition that might be affecting decision making now, that might be affecting decision making for the future or in the future? You also can look at temporal issues. You know, they feel like they're running out of time. Did they get a diagnosis that has a terminal outcome and so they're in a hurry, or are they financially strained and they really need a job now, right? So considering temporal issues, time is of the essence type things. The impact of the transition, it can be really hard for some people to transition into work or into a different job. Maybe they've been in another one for 30 years and they just got laid off, and it's really hard to think of restarting somewhere new or getting new coworkers or moving or these different things. Or maybe they've never had a job before, or maybe there's really low self-esteem, or maybe they have a trauma history that's severe that involves sex trafficking or abuse in the home or a partner, and there's a lot of anxiety surrounding even just working. Maybe because they don't know how to do a job, or maybe they've never developed the skills, or a variety of reasons. And then coping resources and capital can also impact how difficult a transition is for someone. So how much affect tolerance do they have? Like, is any little stressor going to send them into a breakdown, or are they more stabilized and, okay, I'm going to go on the interview, may or may not work out, but I'll be okay, I'll find something, right? Are they going to have that kind of resilient response? Or is it, oh my God, I didn't get it, I'm never going to get anything, right? So where is the emotional stability at? Are they able to cope with life stressors, with emotions? And then capital, I guess, is really just having to do with like savings or with money. How much money do they have to throw at a career transition, right? Do they need to pay for a bunch of trainings? Do they have a lot of savings? What's going on there? So precursors. So this is a degree of satisfaction with a previous job, career, or life role. Like I was saying, it had to do with before. This is has to do with centrality of the previous job, career, or life role that is relevant to their personal identity, their sense of personal identity. You want to consider cultural and contextual background as well as their current life context. For precipitants, this could, like I said before, it's the before. but putting a little more detail into that. In this regard, it's the trigger that prompted the transition, and looking at the degree of choice that the person had in the transition. Did they decide to leave, or were they fired? Were they let go? And then also you want to look at the degree to which the transition was foreseen. Was it completely out of the blue? Did they have any idea that they were going to be transitioning, or were they completely blindsided, right? And you can use this square model to understand where they're at on this grid. Temporal issues, these have to do with age, predictable versus unusual point in the lifespan. Are they 80 and trying to get in the workforce? Are they 18 and trying to get the workforce? Nature of the onset of desire for transition. Is it sudden? Was it gradual? Is this something they've been building up to for years? Or is it last week they were fired and they need something now? You also want to look at time constraints and sense of urgency, like I was previously mentioning, and then look at what phase of the transition process they're in. So are they moving out, moving through, or moving into transition? So also, again, looking at the impact of the transition, you want to look at the impact on relationships, roles, routines, and assumptions, on psychological functioning and emotional well-being, kind of like I was talking about, like the affect tolerance stuff. How are they doing with stress tolerance, distress tolerance, different things like that. Self-image, self-efficacy, how are they doing in those regards? Which self-image is your view of how you look, and self-efficacy is your belief that you can be effective. So efficacy, efficacious. And so if I don't have self-efficacy, that means I don't believe I'm capable of doing things, achieving things. And then also you want to look at the impact on the capacity for subsistence, excuse me. So how likely is this thing going to be able to meet the needs of the client, right? Coping resources, so forms of capital. There are different forms of capital that can function as resources. So it can be economic capital, financial resources, human capital, which could be their education experience, occupation specific and transferable skills. And then social capital could be relational supports, professional contacts, networking capacity. Who do you know? How do you know them? That different stuff is a way to cope with the transition. And then psychological capital would be self-efficacy. Again, how much do you believe you're capable? Hopefulness and resilience. Do you believe that you can do it? Are you going to bounce back if the interview doesn't go as planned? Things like that. And then looking at forms of capital, this figure is in your textbook in figure 18.2, which looks at positive psychological capital, social, human, and economic capital. This looks a lot like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but of course it is different. So economic capital is what you have, human capital is what you know, social capital is who you know, and positive psychological capital is who you are. So you can just see these understood in a different way. I kind of like this more than just bullet points myself. I like visuals. So yeah, that's a good figure to study and be able to use with clients. So looking at special populations, let's get into that. So for people with disabilities, you want to look at definitions and types of disability. What are different things that qualify persons for accommodations? Looking at the Civil Rights Act of 1964 or the Americans with Disabilities Act. These are different things that protect persons with disabilities in the workplace, and it's important to know those things to be able to help them advocate for themselves. I just the other week had a client that I was helping that has intellectual developmental disorder, and helped her to write an email to her HR department to request accommodations at her job because she was too afraid to do it on her own or didn't know how. So knowing what type of disability someone is working with can help you with advocating for the need they have, whether it's an IDD diagnosis, ASD, if they have a missing limb, or is there some other issue that contributes to disability. It's important to know that so you can support them. Also, employment statistics and challenges are helpful to know, to be able to give clients realistic expectations, as well as give them hope that, yeah, it's possible to work the job. There's just going to be some challenges we're going to run into, and that's okay. We'll just figure out a plan for how to do that. And that's where helping strategies become useful, knowing how to help. Okay, looking at definitions here. So the person, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, defines a disabled person as a person with a disability, has at least one of the following conditions: is deaf or has serious difficulty hearing, is blind or has serious difficulty seeing even when wearing glasses, has serious difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions because of a physical, mental, or emotional condition, has serious difficulty walking or climbing stairs, and has difficulty dressing or bathing, or has difficulty doing errands alone, such as visiting a doctor's office or shopping because of a physical, mental, or emotional condition. Right. And so looking at, there's two types of disability that can exist. They can be lifelong, or they can be acquired through some means, whether that's stress triggered diagnosis, or they had a surgery that led to something developing. Good things to know about your client. Looking at employment statistics. So you can see the rate of participation, the employment population ratios, part-time employment rate, and the unemployment rate for persons diagnosed with a disability. So that just shows there's a high rate of employment there versus, you know, this could be something that makes them feel discouraged. Perhaps is that persons with no disability, there's a higher level of employment and a lower level of unemployment, but that doesn't mean that they can't be a successful part of the employed in the labor force. So looking at employment challenges. So you want to look at functional impairment on ability to perform jobs, emotions and psychological needs, cognitive factors like self-efficacy, and then contextual barrier issues like barriers and opportunity structures. So if they work at a particular place, is there an ability for them to move up the ladder, or would they be stuck at a certain level? Things to look at. And then helping strategies, you can use vocational rehabilitation counseling, vocational evaluation, identification, job accommodations needed, and job search support. So for job accommodations, you can use askjan.org for looking at types of accommodations that can be made for people at work. And then for job search support, these are some specialized websites that can be used for these different means on the left. So USA Jobs, Personnel Management, Lighthouse International, Getting Hired, Federal Jobs. These are all different things that could be used for persons with disability diagnoses. And then for military veterans, so we're going to look at their statistics, transition-related challenges, helping strategies. So employment statistics for civilians versus veterans. Guessing this is probably from 2015, given this text came out in 2016, might look different now. I don't know. But you see there's a big difference between civilians with disability, higher rate, versus veterans with a disability. It's much lower. So it's difficult, or it's been difficult historically for veterans to get employment if they have a disability. And then you can also see employment for different veterans of different eras. Right, so black is non-veterans during the Gulf War era is gray. All veterans from 1941 to present is in red, and then the Gulf War veterans, Gulf War era veterans, 2001 to present, are in blue. So you see ebbs and flows in employment statistics there. So looking at transition challenges, there's a number of them to consider for veterans. So there's a reverse culture shock. So they went from team mentality, survival mode, maybe consistently if they were deployed to an active war zone. They're constantly thinking about the team. They're constantly taking orders. There might not be a lot of autonomy that was had during their time in the military. And so it's a big shock to come back somewhere and be told that, oh yeah, I just need you to do this. You're an independent worker. I'm not going to get on to you about it. That could be really hard. The type of residence that they live in could be a transition difficulty. They go from maybe living in bunks with a group of people, of like 30 people maybe, and now they're living alone in an apartment. That could be hard. Geographic location, people with who they live, daily routines, how decisions are made, sense of identity, how connected and understood they feel, in addition to PTSD symptoms that are possible if they were exposed to any traumatic experiences abroad, or veterans can have traumatic experiences before being in the military. There might be unresolved childhood trauma or pre-military trauma that left a military person with PTSD unrelated to their military service. So these are all things you want to pay attention to be able to work with a client successfully. In terms of employment challenge, job searching requires individual competition versus that team mentality I was mentioning. An expression of uniqueness might be difficult because they're expected to all be the same and they're all equal in the military, except of course with the hierarchical ranking. Jobs often involve autonomous functioning, ambiguous expectations, unclear guidelines, which would be very opposite of the military culture, right? For helping strategies, military pre-separation counseling and transition assistance is available. There's a low rate of participation in these programs, which could potentially be because military culture discourages neediness and like getting help and not being able to do it yourself, and it rewards self-sufficiency. So from that standpoint, you want to just be mindful of it's hard to ask for help. I think maybe that has been maybe changing in recent years just because mental health stigma has gone down and people are honestly sometimes proud that they're in therapy and they want to share it with people. So you also want to think about their previous helping experiences. So that did they have a really bad experience at the VA with a counselor? Did they have a really bad experience with a psychiatrist or other helping professionals where it might be hard to build rapport with you or, you know, work on issues and they don't want to look weak or, you know, different things like that. So just things to consider. And then these are some different resources that could be used for translation to, you know, workforce. So you got Career One Stop and these other different ones. And then for helping strategies, you want to look at career counseling, vocational rehabilitation, job search support, and post-secondary education. A lot of veterans might have the Hazelwood Act from a parent that they could take advantage of or that they can use depending, or they might have it where their education is paid for by, forget the name of it right now, but basically if you do your service, your college gets paid for. So school might be an option for a lot of persons. And then again, here are some different resources that can be used for veterans that are wonderful. And then for ex-offenders, I've talked a little bit about this population previously, but let's look at some statistics, challenges, and strategies. So in a large-scale study of 673 clients seeking outpatient mental health services at 21 different agencies in California, Therio and Segal found that 35.5% of these clients had criminal convictions and that more than half of these clients had felony convictions. This same study found that 32% of the clients had spent time in jail and 6% had been in prison. 2,000 people are released from prison every day and face the difficult task of finding employment. So that being said, there are mental health issues among a lot of persons that are going through the criminal justice system. And it's really important that that is acknowledged and seen in working with that population, and that resources are available to them that are specifically able to cater to their needs and their issues as a person that has a criminal history. So for statistics, 1% of the population is currently incarcerated, 3% is on probation, 75% report substance abuse problems, and 48% of inmates have convictions for drug-related crimes. And there's actually a lot of effort being made right now in the area of what are called treatment courts. I used to work for one called Sober Court. It was for DWI offenders. And we'd work with them in therapy, doing IOP treatment and alongside probation to try to help reduce the recidivism rate, which is their rate of reoffending. So you don't want them to reoffend. We want to reduce the recidivism. And so treatment courts have been growing and becoming a newer adopted way to go about probation for some different counties. But yeah, a lot of persons in jail have drug-related crimes and they don't get therapy needed to be able to prevent recidivism or relapsing into drug use. So majorly needed. Looking at racial disparities, 70% of inmates are African American or Hispanic Latino, 10% of all African American males, and 60% of all African American males without a high school diploma. Of all of that, 70%. 64% of crack users are white, 26% are Black, but only 91% of those arrested are Black. For employment challenges, these are supply side challenges and these are demand side. So supply side, meaning it's hard. What are the difficulties with being able to supply a job for someone that has a criminal history? So there's these different issues that make it difficult to supply opportunity versus demand side restrictions. Things that are demanded of them might make it hard to be able to get a job, like can't have a criminal history, can't be on probation, different things like that. For helping strategies, you want to look at career development needs, preparation, and launching. And this can involve self-exploration, occupational exploration, making decisions, weighing pros and cons, trying different things out, just going on interviews, even if you don't want to work there, just getting interview experience. And then for preparation, that could involve developing skills that they may not have ever gained, or maybe that they lost because they've been out of the workforce for a while. And then the launching piece is actually searching for the job. And then for searching strategies, you want to make sure you've got necessary documents listed there. And for job applications, how clients can address criminal conviction questions is they don't want to lie, but maybe don't necessarily volunteer information. So if it doesn't ask what the charge was for, maybe don't say what it was for, but it says, have you been convicted? And you can check yes or no. And if it asks for more information, you can give minimal, but you do want to be honest because we don't want clients to be in the habit of lying. And then interviewing strategies. Here's an example of how a person could positively speak to having a criminal history. So interviewer might say, I see from your application you have been convicted of a crime. Will you explain this to me? Tell me about it. And the applicant might say, in my past, I was involved in drugs, but that is all behind me and I've taken control of my life. I have 2 years of experience in food service and I want to stay in the industry and learn as much as possible. As a result of my past, when you hire me, your company is eligible for the work opportunity tax credit, which can save you up to $2,400. Are you familiar with this program? And that's something else you can educate clients on. And then already talked about these things, but vocational rehabilitation, substance abuse can function as a disability because it makes them incapable of a person incapable of functioning. So you want to look at establishing sobriety to be able to help people with their development. And then you can see table 18.8 in your book for reentry programs. There are also incentive programs they can look at and then use targeted job search to be able to find jobs that are relevant to the jobs they have interest in working. Okay, and then homemakers and caretakers, another group, look at these different aspects. So there's reentry parents, displaced homemakers parents, and caretakers. Reentry parents are parents who are voluntarily returning to be paid to the paid workforce after an extended absence of 3 or more years. It might be because they have kids, might be young kids, or maybe they have older kids that went to college, whatever, they took time off work. Displaced homemakers and parents. So these are parents whose sole responsibility has been working in the home and who lose their main source of income because of divorce, separation, or widowhood. And then caretakers are people serving the role of caretaker for an ailing relative, or they might be the guardian of a disabled relative. So looking at employment rates of parents in 2012, looking at the age of the youngest child, you can see some different statistics here that are interesting to note for clients. You can share them with them. And again, this is 2012, so this is 10 years ago. So it very likely might be close to the same, but I would assume it'd probably be different just because the workforce has changed a lot in the last 100 years and continues to do so. So for the homemaker or stay-at-home parent or the caretaker, these are some different reasons that they might transition into a career. And those are just good things to understand about clients or help them understand, why are you looking for a job? Is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? And knowing about these different things can be helpful in being able to educate, normalize the client with the client's experience educate them on why transitions can happen and normalize their experience of transitioning. And then employment challenges, so skills, education, confidence, networking references, others' perceptions of them, life balance. These are all things that could be an issue for the caretaker, homemaker, and ways that they can be helped. So skills and education, you can provide assessments to look at their skill level, their professional identity, what are they able to do, not do, what are they willing to learn, are there any workshops they can sign up for, things like that. And then maybe even looking at additional education. For confidence and self-efficacy, you can take a two-pronged approach. So one, develop skills that are necessary to warrant a high degree of confidence, and two, develop accurate self-perception, so as to give themselves credit for skills and positive qualities that they already have. So kind of a strengths-based approach there. And then for networking and reentry, we can help them with developing a story to share with others that is true, that addresses their former work life, their absence from the workforce, the gains that they've had as a result of their absence, the wants of why they're wanting to work again, and then also identifying assets that they have to share with a potential employer. And then for networking, you want to help them understand new ways to network. Maybe they don't know what LinkedIn, or they don't know what monster.com or indeed.com or other things are. And then you can also plug them into reentry programs. Lastly, you want to help the client to find a new life balance, which might look like managing their perceptions and literally finding a new life balance, learning how to juggle multiple things that maybe they didn't juggle before, especially if they get multiple jobs, or even if they just get one. It's learning how to shift responsibilities and make space for this new thing in their life that didn't take up space before. All right, well, that's everything. Thank you for attending, and I'll see you in the next and last lecture.